Hey everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be back.
So today we're going to be looking at some news articles detailing a pretty wild drug bust that went down in Georgia.
Yeah, this one is pretty nuts.
Yeah, it sounds like it was more than just, a couple of people getting caught with some small amounts of drugs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was a big one.
Multiple agencies involved. It sounds like it took months of planning and just a huge amount of illegal substances taken off the streets.
Exactly.
So to help us break down exactly what happened here, we have our expert.
Ready to dive in?
I think maybe a good place to start would be like, what was the scale of this thing?
Right, so this operation was called Operation Strictly Business.
Oh,
and it spanned 11 months.
Wow.
And it wasn't just confined to like one county or something.
Yeah, where was it?
So Muskogee County, obviously, and then neighboring counties. And it even crossed state lines into Alabama.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty big.
So that right there tells you they're dealing with like a pretty sophisticated network.
Oh yeah, for sure, like deeply entrenched in the community.
So how did this all start? Like, how did it all unfold?
Well, it all began with the arrest of a guy named Jorge Mendoza
Okay.
in Coweta County.
Right.
And they caught him with a ridiculous amount of marijuana,
How much are we talking?
298 pounds,
Oh my gosh.
plus 7,000 pre-rolls,
Jeez.
2,000 THC cartridges,
Wow.
and over $102,000 in cash.
So this wasn't just like some, small-time dealer or something.
Oh no, this guy was a major player.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, and this was just the beginning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the very next day, authorities executed a bunch more warrants,
Okay.
5 search warrants in Muskogee County, and then 1 in Russell County, Alabama.
So across state lines.
Yep, and these raids resulted in 3 more arrests.
Okay, so who are we talking about here?
All right, so we got Jonathan Provo,
Okay.
Dalvin Farrell,
Right.
he also goes by Spuds,
So, okay.
and DeKendry Snelling, who's also known as Sack.
All right, so 4 arrests in total. And what were the charges? Because I was reading through some of these news articles, and there's like a whole lot of different charges for these guys.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to keep track.
Yeah, it's pretty extensive, the list of charges.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of speaks to just like the complexity of the whole thing, you
Yeah.
know, the seriousness of the criminal enterprise that they were dealing with here.
Absolutely.
So,
Jorge Mendoza.
okay, the first guy.
Yeah, he was charged with trafficking marijuana,
Right.
possession of THC,
Right.
with intent to distribute.
Okay.
And this is interesting, an improper tag.
An improper tag.
Yeah, you gotta wonder if that was maybe like the start of the whole investigation.
Look, it's something as simple as that.
Sometimes those small things can unravel a huge operation.
Wow.
So Jonathan Provo, he was charged with conspiracy to distribute.
Okay.
So that suggests he was involved in like the wider network.
Okay, so like moving drugs around.
Yeah, managing the logistics of it all.
And then what about Farrell and Snelling? Those guys were hit with a whole lot of charges.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot more.
Trafficking marijuana, multiple counts of conspiracy to distribute, and then a bunch of weapons charges too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and those are particularly concerning.
I bet.
So Farrell was found with a machine gun,
Jeez.
and both of them, Farrell and Snelling,
Right.
charged with possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
Oh, wow.
So the fact that they had those weapons just, readily available, that paints a pretty scary picture. Like they were ready for anything.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're running a pretty sophisticated operation. And we haven't even talked about like the total amount of drugs that they seized.
Right.
It's mind-blowing.
It's a lot, yeah.
Like, where do we even begin?
Okay, so remember that 298 pounds of marijuana that Mendoza had?
Yeah.
That was just like the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in total, they got 467.1 pounds of marijuana.
Jeez.
And it wasn't just weed, they found all sorts of stuff.
Really? Like what?
Mushrooms, oxycodone, Xanax,
Oh, my
those
God.
mushroom chocolate bars that you hear about sometimes,
Yeah.
fentanyl, THC cartridges, even some cocaine.
Wow.
So the total street value is estimated at like almost $2.3 million.
That's just incredible.
It is, yeah, it's
It
crazy.
really gives you a sense of the scale of this whole operation.
Yeah.
But there was something else that was mentioned in the articles, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, you're talking about the weapons?
Yeah, besides the drugs, they also found
10 firearms.
10 firearms.
Now, including a Glock switch and 2 Draco rifles.
I was reading about that Glock switch.
That's a scary one.
Yeah, what does that do?
It basically turns a semi-automatic pistol into a fully automatic weapon.
So like a mini machine gun.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, and the Draco rifles, those are essentially like AK-47 pistols, right?
Right.
So very compact, but incredibly incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's scary stuff.
It really is. I mean, the fact that they had access to this kind of firepower is incredibly alarming. Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what would happen if they hadn't taken those weapons off the streets?
It's hard to say, but it's not good.
Yeah. So this bust seems like it was a pretty major blow to this organization or whatever they were running.
Yeah, definitely put a dent in things.
But I think we should go beyond just like the facts of what happened.
Yeah, for sure. There's a bigger picture here.
Absolutely.
Like, what does this mean for the drug trade in the area?
Right. Could it lead to like less drug-related crime?
Yeah. Or will other groups try to fill the void?
All good questions.
All good questions. We'll get into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
You know, it's kind of wild to think about just the amount of drugs and weapons
Oh, yeah.
they got in this bust.
Absolutely.
But that's like you were saying before.
Yeah.
It's important not to like lose sight of the human element in all this.
It's really easy to get caught up in the numbers and all the operational details. But, this bust wasn't just about, like, taking down some abstract criminal enterprise. It was about, disrupting a cycle of harm that impacts real people,
Absolutely.
real families in our community.
Yeah, I think it's easy to hear about something like this and think, well, that's awful, but it's not happening in my neighborhood.
Right.
But the truth is, it affects all of us in some way, whether we realize it or not.
Oh, absolutely. Drug trafficking and gang violence, those things don't discriminate.
Right.
They impact, communities across, different socioeconomic lines, urban and rural areas alike.
So what happens now? Like, what are the potential effects of this bust?
That's a good question.
Could it actually lead to a decrease in drug-related crime in the area?
It's definitely possible.
Okay.
Taking that much, illegal stuff off the streets,
Yeah.
it's definitely going to disrupt the local drug trade.
Right.
Like, we might see prices go up, maybe even a shortage of certain drugs.
Right.
But here's the thing, it's not just about supply and demand. This bust, it sends a strong message to other groups.
Like, hey, we're watching.
Yeah, exactly. We know what you're up to, and we're not going to tolerate it.
That's got to have an effect.
Yeah, that deterrence factor can be really powerful.
Absolutely.
Like, it might make other groups think twice before they try to set up shop in that area.
Right, because they know law enforcement is watching.
Yeah, exactly. They're actively targeting these operations.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, criminal organizations, they're pretty adaptable.
Oh, they are for sure.
Like, do you think this bust will actually have any, like, lasting impact on the gangs themselves?
Like the Bloods and the Gangster Disciples.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Like, are they just going to bounce back?
Well, it's something that investigators are going to be watching closely for sure.
Right.
I mean, this bust definitely disrupted their operations, at least in the short term.
Okay.
Like losing those key members, especially if they were higher up in the gang,
Right.
that can create power vacuums, internal struggles within the gang.
Right.
So they might have to rethink their strategies, their tactics.
It's like shaking things up a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we talked about the weapons charges
Right.
and specifically that Glock switch
Yeah.
and the Draco rifles.
Scary stuff.
Taking those out of circulation, I mean, that feels like a huge win for public safety.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's chilling to think about what could have happened with those weapons.
Right.
Imagine the damage they could inflict.
Right.
Removing them from the equation, that's significant.
Absolutely.
Potentially save lives.
And it kind of speaks to just the dangers of the drug trade in general.
Yeah.
It's not just about buying and selling drugs.
It's about the violence that often comes with it.
Exactly.
These gangs, they're not afraid to use force to protect their interests.
And they're well armed.
Yeah, exactly. That's why these weapons charges are so crucial.
Right.
It highlights the connection between drugs and firearms.
Okay.
And the need to address both sides of the equation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me about this case
Yeah.
was the level of cooperation.
Yeah. So many different agencies involved.
Yeah, we're talking local, state, and federal all working together.
It really shows you what can be accomplished with a coordinated approach.
Absolutely.
So you had the Muskogee County Sheriff's Office,
Okay.
the FBI Homeland Security Investigations, Fort Moore CID, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations Gang Unit, the Coweta County Sheriff's Office, the Russell County Sheriff's Office, and the Lee County Sheriff's Office.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that kind of collaboration is essential when you're dealing with organized crime that crosses jurisdictions like this.
Right, because they don't care about, city lines or whatever.
Bro, they don't.
It's like a force multiplier.
Yeah, exactly. Each agency brings its own, expertise and resources.
Right, they can share information.
Yeah, intelligence coordinate their efforts, pool resources.
Absolutely.
Things that they couldn't do if they were working in isolation.
Right, it's definitely a model for future operations.
Absolutely, not just in Georgia, but across the country.
It really highlights the hard work of all the men and women in law enforcement who are out there putting themselves at risk.
Yeah, their commitment to public safety is commendable.
Absolutely.
But this brings us to an important point.
Okay.
This bust, as big as it is just one battle in a much larger war.
So this isn't the end-all, be-all.
No, it's definitely a step in the right direction,
Right.
but it's an ongoing fight.
Right.
Criminal networks are resilient. They adapt, they evolve, they find new ways to operate.
So where do we go from here then?
Well, law enforcement's going to have to stay proactive,
Right.
monitor the situation closely, adapt their strategies, and be ready to face new challenges.
Right, because things are always changing.
Always changing. But it goes beyond just law enforcement. We need to think about this issue, more broadly.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
To really get to the root causes of gang activity and drug trafficking,
Okay.
we gotta look beyond just the symptoms and focus on those underlying issues.
So what are some of those underlying issues?
We're talking about poverty, lack of opportunity, social inequality, systemic racism, all the things that, drive people toward these destructive paths.
Right.
It's a complex web of problems
Yeah, absolutely.
that require, a multifaceted approach.
It sounds like we can't just arrest our way out of this problem.
You got it.
So where do we even begin?
It starts with addressing those underlying issues that we talked about.
Okay.
Investing in education, creating job opportunities, providing, access to mental health and addiction services, strengthening our communities.
Right, creating a society where everyone has a chance to succeed.
Exactly, not just survive.
And what about the role of drug policy and the criminal justice system?
Yeah, that's a huge piece of the puzzle as well.
It is.
We need to have those tough conversations about drug policy reform.
Right.
Look at alternatives to incarceration that focus on rehabilitation and reintegration.
Right.
We need a system that, offers support, second chances, rather than just punishment.
It sounds like a whole different way of thinking about the justice system.
It is. It requires a shift in perspective.
Absolutely.
We got to move away from that idea that the only way to deal with crime is through punishment.
Okay.
And embrace the idea that rehab and reintegration are possible.
Yeah.
And essential.
For a safer and more just society.
Exactly.
It's really kind of crazy to think about all these things being connected.
Yeah.
Like the poverty and the lack of opportunity, the inequality.
Oh, absolutely.
You start to realize this drug bust is really just like a symptom
Oh, yeah, for sure.
of bigger problems.
Exactly. It's like they say you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it.
Right.
So we can keep making arrests and taking drugs off the street, but if we don't address those root causes,
Right.
we're just putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound.
So what can we actually do? What are some steps we can take?
Well, it's not a quick fix. It takes time, and it's going to take a multi-pronged approach. I think first and foremost, we got to invest in our communities.
Okay.
Support programs that provide educational opportunities, job training resources for people that are struggling.
Yes, I've seen some of those programs.
Yeah.
And they can be really effective,
Oh, yeah, they are.
especially when they focus on empowering people.
Yeah. Giving them the tools they need to succeed.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the individuals.
Right.
It strengthens the whole community.
Yeah, it makes it more stable,
Yeah, exactly.
more resilient.
For sure.
So it sounds like we need to think beyond just traditional policing.
Absolutely.
We can't just react to crime.
Right. We got to focus on preventing it.
Okay.
Invest in those community-based initiatives
Right.
that are addressing things like poverty and lack of opportunity.
And that means working with community leaders,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
organizations that are already out there.
They're already doing great work.
Right. They know what's going on.
They understand the challenges.
Right.
And they know the most effective ways to address them.
And they're the ones who are actually out there working with people.
Exactly. Working with at-risk youth, supporting families, building those bridges between law enforcement and the community.
Absolutely. And we've talked about, criminal justice reform.
Right.
So what are some changes we could make to the system?
To address these issues more effectively,
Yeah.
well, I think one area is sentencing reform.
Okay.
A lot of people feel like the current drug sentencing laws are way too harsh,
Yeah.
and it contributes to mass incarceration,
Right.
especially in minority communities.
Right.
So we got to look at alternatives to incarceration,
Okay.
like drug treatment programs,
Okay.
community-based rehab initiatives.
So shift away from just punishment.
Yeah, more focus on rehab and reintegration.
Right. So help people become productive members of society.
Exactly.
A whole different way of thinking about it.
It's a shift in perspective.
Absolutely.
We got to move away from this idea that punishment is the only answer and embrace the idea that rehab and reintegration are not only possible,
Yeah.
but they're crucial.
To a safer and more just society.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
I'm glad.
We started with this news story about a drug bust,
Right.
and we ended up exploring all these complex social issues.
Yeah, it's all connected.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of the challenges we face
Good.
and the potential solutions.
Yeah, and that's the power of the deep dive, right?
It is.
We take a seemingly isolated event
Right.
and use it to look at these bigger trends, these systemic issues, how everything's connected.
It's been a real eye-opener for me, and I hope it has been for our listeners as well.
Me too.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but this conversation doesn't end here.
Oh, no, for sure.
So to our listeners, as you reflect on everything we talked about, think about what really resonated with you.
Yeah,
What are some things you can do in your own life
absolutely.
to make a difference?
Big or small, every little bit counts.
Maybe it's volunteering your time at a local organization,
Yeah,
having a conversation with friends and family about these issues,
right.
or just educating yourself further.
Exactly.
Every step we take, no matter how small, can contribute to a more just and equitable society.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time.
See ya.